Hi, today we are going to discuss about how to deploy a virtual service edges on VMware machine. Before going to the deployment phases, let's see what is the need for deploying a virtual service edge or private service edge on your corporate office. Private service edges is nothing but a physical component which will be shared by Zscaler, which are pre-configured, and you need to plug and play in your corporate with the IP schema. The need for such deployment is to see the geopolitical requirements, say some and regulations. For example, you can say China regions, and you can say some other countries where the geopolitical requirements are predominantly followed. A typical example is in India, there is Aadhaar card. Aadhaar card details can be only within India. So certain company government websites are viewed from that particular country itself. And certain locations may have high latency when they are sending the traffic via the public service edges. In that case, you will prefer um, virtual service edges. Certain applications, it may be the third-party applications or source IP preserved destinations, requires corporate IP addresses to be whitelisted. In that case, you preferably go with the virtual service edges. Uh, and also, certain countries will have the country-specific contents. For example, India, the Indian language and country-specific database or data will be visible on your websites when you are accessing those sites. For a typical example, Google, when you access from India, google.in, when you access from somewhere else, that google.com UK, like that, it will change. Okay, so you if you want to see the specific location based content, then you have to choose virtual service edges. The predominantly, if the country doesn't have public service edges, then you will be see only the localized contents through the private service edges or virtual service edges. The typical architecture is something like this. You have internal network and you have a internal routers, firewall, and edge routers. The virtual service edges will be placed inside the DMC, and the communication will happen from internal router, firewall, and edge routers. The IPs will be whitelisted to reach the Zscaler cloud. And the internet traffic will be reached via the firewall and edge routers and over the internet. The internal network will be routed the traffic to virtual service edges. It may be pack file configuration, or it may be you can create a GRE over the here, and you can forward the traffic to the virtual service edges. In your corporate, there is only one virtual service edges. In order to maintain the redundancy, there is a backup tunnel from the edge router to the public service edges. The port opening requirements are there. Certain ports needs to be opened. You have to go to this path and understand what are the required ports to be opened over there. These virtual service edges can be deployed on the VMware infrastructure and Microsoft Azure and Microsoft uh, uh, Azure and AWS platforms. So these are the typical requirements. Zscaler are always recommended to do a horizontal scaling, not vertical scaling. Instead of changing the CPU from 4 to 8 or memory to 32 to 64, we have to create multiple virtual services just to in order to handle your load. It's always recommended to have horizontal scaling, not vertical scaling. Certain important things you need to look at the virtual service edges are promiscuous node should be accepted, MAC address changes should be accepted, and forged transmits should be accepted. Hypervisor from 5.0 and above will be allowed. Always recommended to keep the VSEs in a cluster. So there will be two VSE virtual service edges in for the culture purpose. So which will scale horizontally if any increase in the traffic load. For example, a single VSC handles 600 Mbps. If your bandwidth is around 1.3 gigahertz, then you need to keep three VSCs in order to maintaining the load on those particular three devices. Recommended to avoid external load balances. VSC itself having the load balancer. If you are configuring a VSC in load balancing mode, you will see multiple load balancers and a cluster IP addresses to be configured. Load balancers will be available on all the VSCs, and the cluster IP will be referred both load balancers based on the requirements and based on the load available on those VSCs. It's not recommended to go with the external load balances, but still there are use cases you can prefer external load balancers as well. The limitations are when you talk about traffic forwarding, IPsec tunnel cannot be formed, and maximum of 20 virtual service edges instances can be accommodated in a cluster. Dual ARM mode. So when you talk about virtual services deployment, there are two major deployments. One is single ARM mode, another one is dual ARM mode. Single ARM mode means the traffic in and exited from the same interface, and dual ARM means the traffic will be in from one interface and exited from another interface. So Zscaler recommends to go with this approach, dual ARM approach, wherever possible. You will have six interfaces in total on the VH. Um, um, there will be three internal interfaces and three external interfaces. They can name it EM0, EM1, and 2. EM0 is nothing but a management interface which will be faced over the external interface, and EM1 and EM2 are for proxy IP and LBIP, which will be reported towards the internal. And the management EM5 will be configured on the internal interface, and EM4 and EM5 are configured in external interfaces. EM0, EM1, and EM2 are configured manually, automatically from the portal itself. This can be configured manually. These two will be automatic function. Whereas these EM4, 5, and 3 are configured manually. So in this lab, I would like to showcase you the scenario where I have internal network 10.25.00/24 192.168.0.0/16, and I have a VAC configured with the management IP, proxy IP, and LB IPs. The management IP in internet facing is this, and the so you could see the internal IP addresses are something like 192.168.190 subnets, and the externals are 192.168.71 subnets. The port recommends, as I said earlier, you need to go to this path to ensure that appropriate ports are opened for your corporate. Okay, before going to the question sections, let's discuss around how to configure this. You could see there are three interfaces are already defined here. The other three interfaces we will discuss later. This interface is considered as EM0, and the one LAN subnet is configured for this particular one, and the other two interfaces like EM1 and EM2 are configured as VNet 1. Okay, as per the IP schema, you can see that IP schema in the lab architecture, where 192.168 subnets will be used for EM1 and EM2, and EM0 71 subnets will be used. Let's power on. This will take some time. While this loading, let's go to the portal and configure the interfaces for the proxy and the LB. Like I said earlier, you have two different type of deployment modes. One is standalone, another one is clusters. We are going to choose the cluster mode. And the IP addresses of proxy is 192.168.190 dot. Okay, here the gateway will be 2, I guess. Let's put 2 as the gateway. And subnet mask is 255.255.255.0. Since I'm configuring cluster, you could see the configuration information along with the cluster deploy these options as well. If you put standalone, you can have the IPsec termination options. These are recently added. So the earlier versions, this IPsec termination is not possible. I'm gonna go with cluster mode and save the configuration. So you need to give two details like name of the VSE. Let's name of the VSE is named as 01, and the load balancer IP is 192.168.190.132, and save the configuration. Once you save this configuration, a VSE will be created on the portal. Like you could see 2 others VSEs are there, right? You could see the VSEs. You can just go and activate it. And go to the workstation and see this is rebooted. Let's enter the default credentials, and you have the configurations like EM0. EM0 is nothing but interface management interface, which is external facing. So you need to configure sudo vsun configure network and the same password. So it will ask you to do some prerequisites, like you would like to change the name server, no. And you wish to change add the new name server, no. EM0 management interface IP address is configured as .3, and gateway is .2, and also you could see the VAC name as VAC1, and enter. Now the gateway is 172.1. Just try to see the reachability. 71.2. Yeah, it's reachable. Let's try to take the RDP, sorry, SSH from the network. You can just go to 192.168.1.68.71.3 and enter the default credentials. Once you go to here, you need to upload the certificates. Here, there is a certificate, SSL certificate, which can be downloaded, right? Just download the SSL certificate and use WinSCP or any other FTP solutions to upload the certificate. So here I'm gonna use VSE. You can enter the host name. You can enter the default credentials over here. Click yes, continue. Okay, once it is logged in, you can um, go to the downloads path where we already downloaded the certificate. You can just copy and paste it here. Once the vSAN certificate is uploaded, you can go to the SSH section and use sudo vSAN install cert and then the path of the certificate. You could see the certificate path is something like here, and you can use the rename option to copy the certificate name and put the certificate name over here. Certificate is installed successfully now. So now you need to download the build. So you can use sudo vSAN download build. So this will take some time since it's a fresh installation. So let's pause the video and we can come back once it is completed. Now the VAC download has been completed. Download and installation will take 60 to 80 minutes. So after that, you could see the service status, whether the services are running up or not. So you can also go to sudo vSAN status to see the complete status of the vSAN. Yeah, SME services and load balancer services are running on the VM. So now you can go to each interfaces and see the configurations. EM0 is the management interface, which is configured externally, external IP addresses. So you could see the configuration detail. This will be done through the command sudo vSAN configure -network. Okay, and also you could see the EM1 and EM2 interfaces using cat command. The proxy IP and proxy gateway details will be shown over here. You could also see this is EM1 and ZS0. ZS0 is the internal facing network. Wherever you see ZS0, those are internal facing, and ZS1 are external facing networks. And also you could see um, SMLB, that is EM2 interface. Yeah, you could see the LB interface 32, system IP, and gateway is this. And here also you can see the proxy IP 31. the same status. Now you can go here and you could see the configuration is done. And once you configure the VSCs, you can create a VSC cluster. So now I have only one interface, VSC1. You can add only that interface over here and define the cluster IP address. Cluster IP address should be in the same range of LB IP address and proxy IP address. We can 135. And so now the VSC cluster is created. If you want to enable the IP termination, IPsec termination, you can enable it. And also if you configure more VSCs, you can add more VSCs over here. You can add around 20 VSCs in a cluster. So now we have completed uh, the preliminary configurations like management interface and the proxy IPs, and also we configure the cluster IPs from the proxy IPs. The next configurations are related to external interfaces and internal management. We will see those configurations soon.